restaurants are going to play a pivotal role in binding society together. And I think there's very few professions, if you really think about it, that reward generosity in the same way as restaurants do.
Welcome to the Blackberry Podcast, where we share stories, wisdom, and insight from the amazing people we get to meet and collaborate with at Blackberry Farm. Today's episode, we have lots of fun additions. First up is the new co-host, Andy Chabot. He is the Vice President of Food and Beverage here at Blackberry Farm and Blackberry Mountain. But also, Andy Chabot is my husband.
I'm delighted to be here.
And today's guests are Arjav Ezekiel and Tracy Malechek Ezekiel. Did I get all that right?
Nailed it.
Great. Okay. I'm going to just start out by just gushing for a minute about both of them. Let's start with TIME100 Next People of the Year. James Beard Award recognized duo with a restaurant in Austin called Birdie's.
That's us.
So tell us about your first trip to Blackberry, because this is your second.
This is our second trip. Yep. Our first trip was in January of 2018. It's not long. I think we met for the first time, I think in maybe September or October.
Yeah.
I think you were there for the welcome conference.
Yep.
And we started talking, and Tracy had dropped hints over and over again about wanting to come to Blackberry Farm over the years. And I thought, if I was going to ask her to marry me, that I had to pull out all the stops, so I said, okay, Blackberry it is. And all of you were so kind in sort of helping me coordinate that weekend, which became a really important weekend, I think, to us as a couple. I remember when we left here, we looked at each other and we said, wouldn't it be cool to someday come back, but come back doing something with Blackberry. And so this feels like a really special moment for us to be back at the farm after 8 years.
And that was way before we had a restaurant. So it was serious manifesting.
Yeah. And I knew where you were. Where were you during that time? At Gramercy as well? Or
I think I was still at Untitled or
Untitled.
finishing up my time at Untitled.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
You're now running your own restaurant in Austin. You're a Texas girl. So is that take us back to like how you decided to open your own restaurant together and all the decisions of like where you landed, what state, all that.
So before we started dating, we were just good friends. I was closing sous chef after dinner service. He was closing dining room manager. And we lived 3 blocks away from each other in the East Village.
Mm.
So we would take the L train home together. And then one night we were like, why don't we go grab a drink? And so had a couple Negronis. And I kind of felt confident to just say my truth and my dreams. And I was like, someday I would love to open a restaurant with you. Like, we just speak the same language. We want a fun, warm kind of vibe in a dining space. And I just think it would be really great. And without missing a beat, he said, you know what else we're going to do? We're going to get married. And this is before.
We'd never been on a date. This was just like a couple Negronis talking,
You're like, might as well open a
I was like,
restaurant
well,
and get married. Throw it out there.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And here we are.
Some serious manifesting. But I think that's like where it kind of, that's when we started dating, and both our leases expired at about the same time, and we're like, did the classic New York thing where you're like, are we moving in together, or like, what's the deal, So we moved in together, and I think that kind of calcified through some ups and downs, quite frankly, like that we were ready to maybe take the next step and get married. So and then once we got engaged here, we went back to New York and kind of got back into our lives. But one of the things that had become clear is, our leases were expiring. Our new leases were expiring, I think, in late July, and we started having real conversations about what's next. And I think we knew, we were going to get married, and we wanted to start a family, and we wanted to live out the dream of owning our own business. And it became very clear, I think, that New York wasn't the place that either of us wanted to do that. So we started having some real conversations around, whether it would be Portland, Oregon, where I grew up, or Texas, where Tracy's from. And we kind of were in an impasse. We just couldn't figure it out because we were both in that space where I think, couples sometimes can be when they're forming a family, where it's like, no, I'm still in my own headspace wanting to do my own thing. So we couldn't really figure out what we wanted to do. And Tracy finally said, let's flip a coin and trust what the coin
Trust
says.
fate.
So, I picked tails, she picked heads. We flipped, it ended up heads. So Texas got us.
Right.
And I told her, I was like, if we're going to Texas, the only place I'd really want to be is Austin.
Okay.
So we came down, visited Austin, and kind of fell in love with it. It's a remarkable city with that's both growing, but still kind of manages to have a small town charm to it. And we've spent 8 full years there now.
That in itself is a success, right? For a restaurant to live that long, right?
Yeah, well, the restaurant's 5 years old
5
now,
years.
Or it'll be 5 years, I guess, in
July.
July. But we opened, we got there in 2018. We both picked up kind of side hustles as we were kind of trying to find the right space and find the right lease. And we signed our lease in February of 2020, and COVID happened.
Yeah.
And literally the next month, and we had incredible landlords, thank goodness. One of the few stories where we can say that, who helped us a lot during that period. And then we started construction in January 21 and opened in July of 21. And Birdie's, and I'm sure we'll talk about this a little bit, it's kind of a quirky restaurant in the sense that it's a fine dining restaurant, with a relatively large wine list, but it's all counter service. And a lot of those ideas were kind of born out of the pandemic, with the idea that we wanted to build a restaurant that was both sustainable for us and our team.
We obviously work together, and have, I feel like, successfully for a long time.
Yeah, here we are.
And
still.
here we are. Yeah, they haven't kicked us out yet. And that's got to be a little bit of a challenge to, work together all day and then also have home life as well. What's your tips for managing?
Yeah, do you turn it off? Do you say we're not talking about work right now?
So I think that is a fantastic statement, because that was our biggest problem in the beginning, and it's something that creeps in every now and then. But I think establishing some boundaries, for me, it's like when we're at home, 10 o'clock, let's just turn off the work talk, please. We can pick it back up at 7:30 in the morning, but I would just love to unwind, be husband and wife for a couple hours before we go to bed. And we have a 3-year-old at home as well. And so having that hour with him before he goes to school is so important. Coffee with the dogs outside, and having just boundaries from work, because so easily our job is a little bit more on the phone because he has a couple more things he manages ops wise than me, which is menu and farmers and our team. And for me to just be like, hey, can we just circle back to that, please? And I think that, in conjunction with communication, anytime we get frustrated with each other, we're both pretty passionate people, especially around work. I think we've really worked on our pause practice and understanding when we're getting fired up, and just being like, hey, we are so blessed to have this restaurant, this amazing team, and we just need to chill out for a second and reset, and then speak with intention, because it's kind of a joy and amazing to live and work with your partner.
Absolutely.
I think one of the truisms for me was that I think it's very easy to tell yourself a story that's not always true when you're doing things with a person all the time, whether they may be having a bad moment and you're thinking about it through the lens of your own perspective. One of the great unlocks for us was we brought in a business coach, almost 2 years ago now.
Cool.
We found it to unlock tremendous value on the business side too, but I think one of the things we became more aware of was just ourselves and how we communicated, and the things that we needed individually and collectively to be successful. And I think that was a little bit of not a risk, but I was outside our boundaries of comfort when we first did that. But it's truly been one of the great gifts for us. It's equal parts therapy and business coaching, and I think those two things have made us both better managers, better communicators with each other. And it's trickled into our personal lives too.
It's a big project, opening and sustaining a restaurant. My parents always told us when we first got married is to always have a project. And I think
we always have our project.
we do.
I've seen like the photos of Andy fixing fences on your Instagram.
Yeah.
There's always
It's a
something
daily
to do.
project,
Daily
both
project.
at home and at work. So,
So I want to hear about how you guys met.
So Sarah and I have both worked at Blackberry Farm and Blackberry Mountain for over 20 years. And I started being involved with the wine program and got involved with food and wine events that we were doing, like you all are here now. And they were right at the very beginning. And Sarah was working for Sam
Beall, late proprietor of Blackberry Farm, really kind of set the tone for the food and wine direction that Blackberry was going in at the time.
You were originally his assistant, but then you started doing marketing and events. And
I also parked cars.
Also parked cars and carried bags. And, you know, we had like 80 or 100 employees then. Everyone did everything. And so we were in each other's orbit, so to speak. You know, she was working on events and I was working events. And I think there was one particularly challenging event. I think I ran into you
crying in the garage.
In the garage of a house, stuff like that. You put a lot of pressure on yourself. You want to be great. And I think I just said something along the lines of like, these things happen. You know, it's sort of like, it's okay to hold yourself to a high standard, but we're humans, you know, and things happen. And that was kind of our first real interaction. And so we worked together for years before.
Well, who made the first move
together.
though? Like who asked for that?
Sarah.
I made the first move.
Yeah, Sarah did.
Yeah. I'd gone on this like really crazy trip with Sam Beall, and it was just one adventure after the other. It was just like a lot of funny mishaps, and probably could be a whole podcast in itself, that one trip. And I was down in the office telling the girls all the details, and Andy came around the corner and said, what's so funny? And I was like, I'm not telling this story again unless there's dinner and wine involved. And about an hour later,
I followed up on that.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And I remember the story was about, I think the story that was so funny was how Sam always had this ability or a belief in himself that he could pack a lot more into time than he could. And he sort of arrived late for the plane. And they were holding the plane for him, commercial plane. And then he went and bought like a bag of cashews.
Yeah.
After he got to the gate. You know, and that was sort of that story.
Yeah.
So I still remember, you know, that story. We went to a bistro that, you know, at the time was probably the nicest place we could go. And yeah, we hit it off. And we, you know, as you were saying, you know, we're all in this business together. We have similar passions. It's not that hard to find someone who sort of aligns with you in this industry. And it was just very natural, you know, for us. And we made it work really well. We've been married now for 2009 to, it's almost our anniversary. I was looking it up again the other day. So in May, it'll be our anniversary. 17 years this year. Yeah.
Happy early.
Yeah. So it's been great, you know, and it is hard not to make everything a meeting, you know, but you have to just focus on that and have other interests.
What a cool story.
I love that. And can I ask really quick, what are your tips for not bringing work home?
I failed last night. I think he's better at it than I am, and partly he's much better at compartmentalizing just in general, and I'm a sort of an oversharer. But I think for us, because we do have the farm, our personal farm, that you know, there's always like a fence to fix or cows need feeding or whatever. So there's always like something outside of our work that needs discussion.
Have other interests.
Yeah,
I think you know, like I the cycle, you ride horses, we run, you know, and we just have other things that we like to do other than food and wine. But we also love food and wine.
Yeah.
You know, so it is. I mean, when you're passionate about what you do and you go into the thing that you're passionate about, it's easy to let that thing grow till it's overweighted. And you're, you know, like you can let the family slide because work and your passion are bigger than that. You know? So you do have to just think about balancing those things and not letting those passions and profession collide too much.
Yeah.
That's great
Love
advice.
that. Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about counter service.
Yeah.
Because it's such an interesting way to do fine dining. You know, and I think everyone hears counter service and you think like a pizza restaurant, or you think, like you go there and you get your number. How did you land on that, and how do you make it work in a fine dining setting? I'm taking notes here,
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's been an evolution too.
Yeah.
I think when we first kind of came up with the idea, it was very much, I think, part and parcel with being in Austin. There's so many counter service restaurants. Barbecue is a great, I think, example of that. There's so many taco restaurants where you kind of just stand in line. And I think Tracy and I kind of fell in love with the casual way you could interact with a restaurant in that way, where, we are not planners. We're not the kind of people who are like make a reservation like 3 weeks in advance and are counting down. It's like, where are we going to dinner tonight? Like an hour before. And I think a lot of people we know are like that. And I thought with Tracy and I, when we were talking about this, we thought like, hey, this is a really interesting model. And then I think COVID hit, and we started to ask ourselves some really difficult questions, like, why are we doing this restaurant? What does it look like if we're successful? What do we want our home life to look like? Because we'd gotten so much time to like spend with each other.
Yeah.
We were ready to get back to work, but we also understood the like intrinsic value of like spending time with each other and as a family. And I think as we went through that, we started realizing that we wanted to try and build a new model, one that valued time, everyone who works their time, valued their space away from work. Because one of the one of the central theses of Birdie's is that like you really need time away from your work to be able to show up at work, and I think as we looked at that, we also realized like a lot of the toxicity in restaurants that people were talking a lot about in that era from our perspective, and was that like people didn't have enough space away from their work, and if you're always just thinking about like the next dollar and how you're going to survive, you never really have an opportunity to thrive, especially as a small restaurant.
Right.
So, one of the things we really wanted to figure out was how do we become a more profitable business so that we can take some of those profits and turn them back towards the people who work within the restaurant. So, we're really proud of the fact that we have 5 weeks almost of paid and planned vacation every year, healthcare, paid family leave, subsidized mental therapy, all these things that have allowed people who've come into the restaurant to think of even a small restaurant as something that could be a career for them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we really took COVID as this reset moment and opportunity of like, okay, we've worked the 80 hours a week for a long time. We've learned some amazing things, but how do we take a pause right now, like as the whole world kind of paused for that long period of time? And how do we say, how are we going to design the life we want and the business we want, not only for ourselves, but for our team? Because life is too short to work with people who are unhappy. And we want our colleagues to be learning, growing, pushing hard, but just be in a positive professional work environment. And so we kind of made this Venn diagram of all of the things that we valued and we wanted to create. And we just kind of designed that with counter service. And then with the cuisine, I was really adamant that, first we were taking a big risk, but I was like, let's just come out guns blazing, zero compromise on the food. I want to use the olive oils and all the ingredients, supporting our local farmers, everything I've done in fine dining historically through my career. And we're just going to do it in this unique, a little bit more casual, but still warm, hospitable setting. And, you come, if there is a line, we do serve wine and non-alcoholic beverages in line. So folks can stay hydrated in that Texas weather.
Good.
And it kind of turns into a party on those busier nights. And I think it's a place where our team exudes warmth and kindness, professionalism, and we have an open kitchen. So it kind of feels like you're coming to our home and you can see everybody cooking. And that was kind of unique for Austin, with the exception of sushi restaurants at that time.
I think for Tracy, it was like about, uncompromising kind of cuisine. For me, it was, this kind of the service hospitality balance was, we're going to compromise on some elements of service, but not at all on hospitality, right? And I think it was like, and we wanted to also like push counter service a little bit, because one of the things that has always bugged me is like, casual restaurants can sometimes be really sloppy, and formal restaurants can be a little too pretentious. And I thought there was this opening in the middle where you could push casual not towards the formal, but to a little more kind of structured, rule-based order. So, my background's fine dining, and I have some things that are just baked so deep into my soul that I can't let go of them. But you have to ask yourself, like, is backhanding the guest, for example, priority one? And to me, it was not, right? So it was like
You should explain what backhanding is for folks who don't work in restaurants.
It's kind of in the
Love it.
weeds.
Here's
But,
the
Like a
next
backhand
podcast.
tennis.
but it's basically making sure that your back is never facing the guest when you're serving them, or you're not
In the back of
intruding
your
on their
hand,
space.
yeah.
Being aware of guest space is another way to think about it, which is, I think, an important thing to be aware of when you work in a restaurant. So we teach it, but the way we think about our restaurant is we play jazz, but to play great jazz, you have to understand the classical music, the classics, So we teach the rules, but we give our team the ability to break those rules in the interest of hospitality. So, like, on a slow Tuesday in the summer, am I going to be a little bit more aware of whether you're not following the rules? Absolutely.
Yeah.
On a really busy Saturday in October during Formula One, am I going to care? Probably not.
Yeah.
I'm going to
Get
make
the food
sure
to the people.
Yeah, but also make sure they're happy and
Yeah.
they feel connected to the restaurant in a deep way.
Yeah.
I think that that's part of the reason we love Blackberry is the food's amazing. It's an incredible setting. But we feel connected to the land and the people, and I think that's what makes an experience worth coming back for.
Yeah.
For sure.
And on that backhanding note, it's when you go to a place that's too strict about it, and the server is trying to figure out how not to backhand when they're standing at the table.
It's the worst.
It's the worst thing. They're standing there like awkwardly holding the plate, trying to like. It's like the best thing is to put it down in an unobtrusive way.
Yeah,
is what we've always kind of taught. And yes, there's rules, but sort of like if that rule is going to make you do the wrong thing in the wrong instance. But yeah, it's always so weird when someone's like, how do I put this down?
Yeah, I'm always thinking as a guest, like, just drop it.
Just
It's
please,
cool.
He's like, is that my food? I'd like it.
Yeah.
So talk us through, like, as a guest, they come in, they get on, in the queue, I guess. And if it's a busy night, they can order wine. How do they order wine? How do they order a cocktail?
Yeah, so I think maybe a little background here. So when we opened, we were an a la carte restaurant, and we're very lucky and blessed. Like, I think September that year, the New York Times had its first ever kind of 50 best restaurants in the country, and we didn't know that list even existed, and we somehow ended up on it.
You opened to just great acclaim.
Yeah, and our volume tripled basically overnight. So we had to make some real time adjustments real fast to like adjust to this new reality we lived in. We were no longer just like the neighborhood restaurant; we'd suddenly become a destination restaurant, and I think our volume kind of grew and grew and grew, and the experience was good, but it wasn't as great as we had originally envisioned. So I think last April, for a host of different reasons, we moved to a prefix format. And one of the reasons we did it wasn't the only reason, but one of the reasons we did it was to consciously reduce our volume a little bit so that we could go back to focusing on the things that both of us really loved, And so the way it works now is like, instead of waiting an hour and a half, like the average wait time now is maybe 20 minutes. But people line up at the counter just like you would at a barbecue restaurant. You make your choices from the prefix at the counter.
So there's like a menu behind the counter.
So we have a menu on the counter,
okay,
and a wine list on the counter. And the people working the counter tend to be the most senior members of the team who can very quickly talk you through the wine list and the food. You pick your choices on the categories, and then you have an option. If you know what you'd like to drink because you've had a wine list in line for 20 minutes and have had some time to talk to a som, you can order it at the counter, or you can sit down and we'll send a som over to your table where you'll order the wine. Once you sit down, it feels like a restaurant, like a normal restaurant. People are clearing your plates, bringing you more things as you need them, checking in to ask about wine and how your dinner is. So it's not like a hands-off kind of counter service experience where you're expected to bust your plates at the end or anything like that.
Or get your own water,
Or get your own water. Like, once you sit down, we've picked these points that are really important. For me, like the beginning and end of the meal are always the most important parts of the meal, but I think the middle sometimes gets lost. So, we have 2 or 3 different points where we consciously check in with guests. But I don't know if this is true for y'all, but like, I think maybe it's post-COVID, but think Tracy and I also like, as we've gotten older, kind of like our own space
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
We don't need to be checked in 3 times. We don't want like a 8-minute spiel before every dish or before we like
Sure.
order. And I think the restaurant in some ways is a reflection of the way we like to eat.
Love that.
Mm-hmm.
You don't need to have how to order from a menu be explained to you at the
That's
beginning
right.
of
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
I like this. You've moved that, like the menu presentation and everything, to a really controlled place,
Mm-hmm.
which is kind of nice. In a restaurant, a lot of times that's you might not know how that's going as the manager or the owner.
You should talk a little bit about how you like have also like how
Excuse
prefixes
me.
allowed you to kind of evolve
Yeah.
your
Mhm.
cooking, which I think has been the most remarkable piece of this for us,
Yeah. So now that we're a prefix menu, it's been a lot of fun for me and for our kitchen team as well. So we change everything top to bottom every 4 weeks,
Wow.
which is a fantastic challenge.
Yeah.
So our cuisine has always been seasonal American
Mhm.
with Italian and French influences,
Okay.
celebrating what's growing around us.
Mhm.
So now I feel like every menu feels more focused.
Mhm.
There might be 1 or 2 options, like maybe the entree is a choice. Sometimes an app is a choice, but everything else is set. Oh, sorry, desserts usually
No
always a
choice.
choice as well.
Yeah.
So it's 2 to 3 choices per menu. So it's not like guests have to take a while once they get to the counter person to order. And everything's themed. So this menu we're doing France in the 1970s, a
Okay.
celebration of the
It's so
Nouvelle
cool.
Cuisine
Yeah.
movement. Paul Bocuse and many other chefs who shifted away from the kind of roux, heavy cream based style of cooking to a lighter, fresher, more vibrant style of cooking, which has been really inspirational to me because those chefs taught chefs who taught chefs that taught me.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it's been passed down all these techniques, and it's really meaningful for me to be able to share that with our team and, honor
Huh.
who's come before us. The menu before this was Northern Italy. Um, Texas doesn't get a lot of cold weather, as you
Yeah.
probably know. So I had to squeeze in a few different regions of Northern Italy to
To make it work.
January
Yeah.
to make it work exactly. And then December, Bistro Remy, French Bistro.
Mhm.
So that's kind of the flow of it. So every menu is just very cohesive, and we
Huh.
really want it to kind of transport you to a place, perhaps a time, and tell that place's story.
And what's the sort of craft or the conversation between what she's doing and then what wines you're either putting on the list or presenting or highlighting?
I think most great restaurants allow the kitchen to kind of drive the menu piece of it, and our job is to support, advise and consent is what I always say, is
I
that
like that.
but in that sense, like what we do try and do is make sure that by the glass list is rotating to
Mhm.
reflect the food, and
Yeah.
we always have like a backstock of wines that we can rotate because it is generally jumping like France to Italy in some ways. So we have we're always kind of paying attention, but I think one of the rooted pieces of her cooking she talked about a little bit was it's American food, but influenced by these things. So one of the things we've worked really hard on doing is trying to support more American winemakers over the
Mhm.
last year, especially on the By the
Yeah.
Glass
Yeah.
program. We've been doing that through collaborations, which is really
Oh,
cool.
fun.
So we commit to buying a barrel of wine from, we're doing a collaboration with one of my favorite winemakers in America, Raj Par,
Mhm.
who is also of Indian descent, like me. We do what we call a Birdie's Blanc because people are allergic, if you will, to Chardonnay in America right now. But it's been
That's funny.
wonderful to reintroduce people to what they did not think they would like to drink,
Mhm.
Chardonnay, through a different lens, through what, I think is really a new movement in California to revitalize that grape and bring it to make it more special. We did a rosé with Outward Wines in San Luis Obispo. Eric Asimov just wrote a really cool article about that region. And then we worked with Jolie Lade
Nice.
in Sonoma too to make a cool, like a chilled red. And that's been really exciting for us because I think it connects to the ethos of the restaurant, which is to support the people that are doing important things in this country and in our industry.
Mhm.
They're all great people first, and then we kind of sprinkle in the French stuff, et cetera, around it because as we've the tariffs, et cetera, have definitely marked those things up now significantly, and we have both a duty and an opportunity, I think, as wine professionals to support American winemakers too.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you have like a bit of a pricing frame on your list. Tell me about that.
Yeah, I think, in this year especially, I think there's been such a large national conversation around affordability, but it's been happening at the same time. There's been this kind of macro conversation around people are drinking less. And,
Yeah.
you know, as I was thinking about it and sitting on it, I was thinking about what my life looked like when I was in my mid 20s and my late 20s, and what it even felt like coming to Blackberry Farm the first time and
Yeah.
like emptying my bank account
Yeah.
to like buy Tracy a ring and
Yeah.
like, putting yourself in that mindset, I think makes you think about like how you're pricing things.
Yeah.
So one of the things we've done is we want, luxury to feel approachable.
Right.
We want fine dining to feel approachable. And I think, the menu Tracy puts out every month is $79. There's an optional add-on that gets you like it's $21, like a luxury add-on, like with Wagyu
Right.
beef or something
Right.
like that, but it gets you to $100 maybe, which is not cheap, but it's certainly not on the upper end of what tasting menus typically are.
Yeah, it's 6 courses. So
6 courses.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and
I
then
mean, wow.
the by the glass list is all under $20.
Mhm.
And then we have 2 lists on purpose. One is the Birdie's list, which is kind of like the hip new winemaker
Yeah.
list. Tried to price everything on that list, under 150 or so, but
Mhm.
I would say
Hmm.
70% of that list is under $80.
Wow.
And then we have a gems list where if you're out to celebrate and you want to drink a bottle of DRC or Reyes or whatever it is, you can, So we want to give people the opportunity to like pick their own adventure at Birdie's. But one of the things we found this year is as we've reduced the pricing on both the by the glass list and the bottle list, people are now drinking 2 bottles instead of
Yeah.
1.
Right.
They're drinking 3 glasses instead of 1, right? And I think it's been a really interesting insight as to maybe not the entire situation in this country around
Right.
people drinking less wine, but maybe gives us a clue on there's a younger generation that just can't afford to eat out the way they once did.
Yeah.
And we need to meet them where they are too.
Yeah. Absolutely. So you mentioned that Birdie's became like a destination restaurant versus just a local one. A lot of our guests obviously travel to Walland, and just thinking about like when you're diving into a new city or like what makes you travel to experience a restaurant.
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know. I'm always searching for a place that knows who they are
Mm.
and has a voice. When I come to Blackberry Farm, it's like this is, my second time here, and it's just where you are. You see those mountains in the back. Here at the farm, you see the rolling hills,
Yeah.
the sheep. It's just the warmth of everyone you talk to, every passing golf cart, as you drive the golf cart around the property, you just know where you are and
Right.
you feel that energy. And there's just something really special about the nature here. So I think whether I'm thinking about vacation or a restaurant, eating at the barn or the Dogwood, fantastic restaurants, any city in the world. And I just feel like we're always kind of searching for that special, unique magic.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, I think restaurants to me that always stick with me in some ways are restaurants that feel really warm, but you can kind of get a sense as to who's cooking
Mm.
in the kitchen,
Hmm.
like just through the food, And I think as I've gotten older and maybe a little crankier, like I like restaurants that are confident
Uh-huh.
in their cooking, and the way I think you can show that confidence is through simplicity. I tend to gravitate to restaurants that cook simply, and interestingly enough, in my experience, that's usually women in the kitchen. Like
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
about how you can have a piece of guinea fowl and a great like jus,
Mhm.
and that's good enough. And man, it is so hard to do that, And I think
It is. Yeah.
it is much easier to hide it under a bunch of microgreens and all the like techniques you've learned along the way. But
Hmm.
grilling a piece of meat perfectly, resting it perfectly, getting that perfect cuisine, that's not an easy thing to do. And I think there's some confidence is the thing I think that like I feel the most when I walk into a restaurant. And some of that's also reflected in the hospitality you get when people can be themselves in a space rather than like a version of themselves they think they need to be.
Right.
Serverisms is what I always call it. Like, how are we doing today? It's like, who's the we?
Royalty.
And like, I think we're lucky to be in the South too, because I think, y'all is like the most hospitable word in the English language, I think. And, I used it even when I was in New York because I was like, oh, this is like an unlock. I heard somebody say y'all once and I was like, oh, this is...
It's probably me.
Yeah, it might have been you actually.
Tracy, yeah.
And I was like, oh, I'm stealing this. This is the greatest word in hospitality, And I think when someone approaches your table and says, hey, y'all, I'm so happy to see you, it feels like you're part of their party for the night, And I'm really drawn to restaurants that have that kind of energy to them.
Okay, but how do you get to that restaurant? Like, if how do you find it? Like, I always, yeah, is it word of mouth? Is it like, are you like looking like where to eat in Chicago or?
It's a little bit of both.
Yeah, I think we just talk to our friends in our community and hear, what's going on. I think, as much as we're trying to put our phones down, like Instagram, we'll see where our friends are going also. And you're like, oh, that place looks interesting. And then we'll message them like, what'd you think? And kind of dive in more.
But you guys have great friends that know that.
But 4 or 5 of our friends say, hey, this is a spot you got to check out. Then that's going to move to the top of our list, And I think I actually spend a lot of my time now on YouTube. Finding things, seeing things, getting a vibe of places and things. But like anything, I have a working Google map in like the 12 cities I want to go see in the next 3 years and building little Google map lists of all the places I want to go check out and then going to YouTube and spending some time like digging in. But it's also, inspiring because you can watch these things on YouTube and you're like, man, I haven't seen that bottle of wine in a while. I kind of forgot about that producer.
Yeah.
Like, I need to see if that wine comes to Texas. I've like missed drinking that wine. It should go on our list. Like there's little things that kind of pop up in the research process of like finding where you want to go. But I think, Google Maps and, one thing that has worked really well for us is we'll put up something on our Instagram stories. We're like, hey, we're thinking about going to Paris for our August break. Anyone got any recs? And then you get completely bombarded with like DMs and you're like, okay, I got to delete the story. But
I think something else that's cool for, folks who maybe don't have their own restaurant. It's like, this is going to sound really nerdy and less so restaurant specific, but I always download Rick Steves when I go to a European city. And like, it's such a fun way. Like we'll both put it on we'll be like, okay, let's press start. Yeah. And then we'll start cruising through, a tour on a city corner. And it's like a lovely 30-minute private tour because I don't really want to go explore a city with like 30 other people. Like I just kind of want to do it as us and maybe our toddler. And I think that's been fun. And then also what we did in Venice is you were like diving around YouTube and just watching like random bloggers and then just kind of like picking out what looked interesting.
Good. Yeah. Yeah. How's that showing up on the screen, Yeah.
Exactly. And I think it's also like, is this the kind of vibe we want today? Like, we bring our 3-year-old with us in like a restaurant like this, you get to visualize those things, I think, before you get there. But I think like anything that's, analogs can also help, which is like calling people, texting people. But, we also live in a bubble and we're aware of the fact that like restaurant people will be the first to pick up a phone call when you call and say, hey, where should I go?
Right.
But we do look at like different lists and things. We'll look at it, but then that's just kind of like a suggestion and we'll kind of dive in and explore to see what fits what we're looking for.
Any red flags?
Lots of influencers.
There you go.
Dark lights. I think the big red flag for me is always like food that looks like you don't want to eat it, but you want to see it, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And you can pick those places out from a mile away.
Yeah. And touristy places, right?
Touristy.
But there's a place for touristy places. See, like
can be, but like I'm talking like when you're in France and you go to the bistro.
Yeah.
That looks
like a bistro.
Like a bistro.
Yeah.
You know, like
Yeah.
we've been to those places. I
Yeah.
got that terrible gizzard salad one time. One of those. I was like, I
Yeah.
swear they're doing this to the American.
Yeah,
You
no,
know,
we
and then
typically
go-
get into the tourist places to see the
Yeah.
church, the museum,
Right.
the thing,
Mhm.
and get out. And like, for example, just using Venice again here, we stayed in Cannaregio, which is like, just north of the madness of Venice. And it felt like we got to hang out with some of the few locals that still live there and like
Oh,
see
yeah.
where they have coffee and like practice our terrible, 3 Italian words we know with them. And, it
But
was
then
just
you also
so
kind of have to go
warm.
to Harry's
Right.
bar and like be with the tourist for a second and have a surly waiter.
You got to go to
You know,
Harry's.
and
Yeah.
like
You do. Yeah.
He hated us.
he just like and I was like
Hated.
he just wanted us to leave and I was like this is tight. Like I like this. This
We had
is
a
like
3-year-old and he was just like, "Are you kidding me?
it's
These
like
Americans."
these Americans coming in here ruining my day. And I was like, we just have to get our drink and get out.
You
Yeah.
know, that's just all day for him, though.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
exactly.
It wasn't you. I'm sure it wasn't personal.
No, and it was great. It was like part of
It's part of the
the
place.
charm, you know?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
So March is almost over. You got a new menu?
yep.
Yeah. That I need to start working on at some point after Blackberry Farm.
I think we're extending this next one because it's just been like such a hit with people
Yeah.
for like extra week.
Mhm.
And then I think Tracy was talking about doing
A spring
the
menu.
spring harvest kind of
Mm.
bounteous spring
Yeah.
vibe.
And then maybe Lazio, the region of Rome, after that.
Wow.
And then this summer, we're going to do a French Riviera menu.
That's
So
cool.
for those folks in Austin who maybe don't have the time or to get away to France, they can just come to Birdie's and for a couple hours, like, hear some French music and
Yeah.
eat some French
Mhm.
coastal cuisine.
It sounds so cool. I mean,
Yeah.
you mentioned is a destination restaurant, but I'm sure you have lots of repeat
Oh yeah,
guests
totally.
that are just so excited, like they don't get bored coming back because it's not the same thing again
It's
and
a restaurant you
again.
can come to every month. You
Yeah.
know, it's like if you're gonna have one date night every month with your partner, like we want to be the place you come to because it's changing all the time.
Are there things that stay the same though? Like, is there like a dinner roll or anything, or is it completely new?
There is a soft serve because you have a soft serve
Yeah.
machine and I love soft serve in some form or fashion on the menu. So
Okay.
obviously as a dessert, but maybe that's on a tarte tatin, maybe that's with olive oil, maybe that's with hot fudge for our Brooklyn red sauce menu Aiellos that we do
Mhm.
twice a year.
Mhm.
Nice.
But there's always soft serve.
There's always soft serve, but there's no like
You don't have
there
like
were a couple of things that were really hard for me to let go of from the a la carte menu, like the beef tartare, which was like
Right.
the only dish on that menu that had never changed. And it was like the perfect beef tartare and people would like go nuts
Aw,
for it.
thanks.
And Tracy was like, maybe someday I'll bring it back. And it hasn't come back yet.
Mhm.
Uh-huh.
Like I wanted to
It was
come
like
back.
a heavy
but-
hint. It sounds.
Yeah, yeah. But
You know,
as a
We'll
general
see.
rule, I think one of the cool things has been like let's move on. Like,
Yeah.
we've explored this technique, we've explored this idea. Like we can come back to it in a year or two.
Yeah.
But like, I think Tracy is also aware that we have like some cooks that have been on the restaurant now
Yeah.
for 4 years and like her job is to push them, and to keep getting better and like developing their canon of like
Well, I just think that too, as like cooks and servers too, but cooks, it's like, yes, it's based on leases. As you mentioned earlier, is like their lease is up. So, but they don't have to move on to learn something else.
Yeah.
A lot of times,
Mhm.
like I've been at this restaurant for 2 years. I feel like I've, reached what
Yep.
I can reach here. Now I
Mhm.
have to go somewhere else to learn a different technique.
Yes.
So just from a staffing retention, I mean, it's something I think about a lot in this day and age of restaurants is like
yeah.
you have to think of retention and staffing.
Mhm.
And it's got to really help with that on both sides. It keeps it interesting on
It-
the front of
yeah.
house and the back of house.
It's so important. I could not agree more. And it's something that's been really fun transitioning from a la carte to prefix is that
Yeah.
I feel like the handcuffs are taken off from
Yeah.
the chef's perspective. I can, try more techniques. We can play around with different proteins. Because the menu's a little bit more concise and there are less dishes, we can spend a little bit more time plating them and put a little bit more, finesse into how we're doing all things.
Mhm.
And I think our team was hungry and ready for it and definitely up for the challenge.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to lie, day one of every new menu is a great challenge,
Mhm.
but it's so much fun. And the reason I cook is to feel alive,
Yeah.
to connect with people through that joy. And I always want to have a place that feels alive and of the place. And I think Birdie's, we're never, said we're going to create a perfect restaurant, but we wanted to create a personal restaurant.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I love it. And I think there's been you know, we've been doing this long enough where, you know, I remember, you know, the tasting menus were like rare and important, and then everyone had a tasting menu for a while. Then everyone got sick of tasting menus, and the guests wanted more choices. And we pushed the choice thing very far, you know, and everyone sharing plates, and there was nothing but choice.
Mm-hmm.
But to kind of get back to, you know, almost a tasting menu with some choice and some concise cooking, and everyone having their own food and these types of things.
I love my own plate.
Yeah, I really love where it's gone. But there's a whole almost generation of people that never saw tasting menus.
Yeah.
You know, so now it's new almost for them.
It's so cool to me when like a kid from UT can show up with, you know, his girlfriend on Valentine's Day, and they're coming in for a tasting menu that's like not going to crush them, because I do think we have a responsibility both on like the restaurant staffing side and for our guests to make sure that we're like paying attention to like the way young people are doing things, to make sure that we're bringing them along, because, you know, when we think about our tomorrow dollars as an industry, we need to be thinking about what it's going to look like in 15 years. And if someone had their first best meal at Birdie's, that's meaningful to them, you know, and I think they'll come back. And it's the same thing with the wine list. It's like, you know, in your 20s when you can only afford like a $50 bottle of wine, and you know, because you're in law school and you're broke, 10 years later, when you're a partner at the law firm, you come back and you're drinking the DRC, you know, and I think you're along the pathway because you've built trust. And I think one of the things we've tried to do as best as we can is to always be thinking about 5 years from now, not just about like the bottom line tomorrow, because I think you end up making decisions that may feel right for today, but aren't right for just down the road. And I think that's a really important lesson, I think, from our experiences, like making sure you're thinking about tomorrow and like building for tomorrow every single day.
Yeah. And I think, just to finish that point, I think the approachability kind of stance is so important to Birdies. You know, parents dining with their kids who are maybe running around the backyard, like we have a kids menu. You know, maybe that college diner is intimidated by wine. I know when I was 21 and I could order my first drink, I was kind of like, I don't know, Long Island iced tea. Like I knew nothing, you know. And then regarding wine, maybe I knew like a couple glasses my parents would drink at dinner, but other than that, totally clueless. And so I think if we can, you know, make Birdies a place that it's welcoming to people in their 20s, 80s, or even little kiddos, like everyone just feels good.
Everyone deserves to eat well at great restaurants. Yeah,
I'm with that.
Absolutely. So for the young hospitality people or chefs coming up in this industry, what's your advice to the next gen?
Young guns?
Young guns.
Young blood.
I would say, you know, have a positive, hardworking attitude, and you just got to get in there and cook. You know, I think I went to culinary school in CIA in Hyde Park, and that was a great experience for me. But at the end of the day, you know, it kind of depends on, you know, what your budget is and what makes sense, because to go and be a professional cook, you know, you're not going to be a gazillionaire right away. And, you know, it really is a labor of love. And so just make sure you love the craft of cooking. And if you do, just commit yourself to it. Find a place that, you know, treats its teammates well. But just know that it is going to be hard work. But if you're with the right people, learning from kind, inspired professional people, it is such a fantastic industry.
I will die on this hill, but I think, and I was talking to Andy about this yesterday, I think restaurants are the most noble profession in so many ways. And I think we as a society need to value restaurants more for what they do for our communities and for our societies, and especially as AI is like going to be the thing that we talk about for the next 20 years. I'm a big believer that restaurants are going to play a pivotal role in binding society together. And I think there's very few professions, if you really think about it, that reward generosity in the same way as restaurants do. And I think it attracts a certain kind of person. So my thing with young people is like, this is a real profession, and this is a profession worth pursuing. It takes time. It's also craft. And there's a little bit of artwork to it, but it's mostly craft. But if you give yourself to this industry for 10 years, in the dining room, as much as the kitchen, you will leave with a skill set that is applicable to a million different things. You know, people who walk out of restaurants after a decade, you can go do things. Like I've seen people go into marketing. I've seen people go into coding. I've seen people do a bunch of other things because the thing they have developed is a sense of people. And I think that is the thing that in this world gets you to the next level. If you can be a great communicator, if you can read a room, if you can see the difference in the person, that the way that person's eating versus that person's eating, and say, oh, this person's like upset about something, but they need space. This person's upset, but needs engagement. Like you're able to learn those skills in a way that I think are translatable to so many different things, you know? And I think I'm a big believer in the nobility of my profession, and I am a big believer in proselytizing the greatness of restaurants, because I think one of the things that's happened is, you know, with these controversies, et cetera, is that like there's this idea that like restaurants are toxic and like restaurants are tough. All work is tough. Restaurants are not toxic. Maybe they were 25 years ago, and maybe there's still a couple of bad actors, but most restaurants are great, and we need to be talking about that more.
Yeah, you know, so you talked about the importance, you know, of restaurants in the community and for society. You know, what's your plan for staying relevant and growing, or is your plan to grow? What is the future?
Hot topics.
I think when the time is right, the space is right, it's the right time for the team, we probably will. I think there will always only be one Birdies, but we have kind of other concepts that we're dreaming about.
Love that.
When all the conditions are correct. So we've had, you know, some opportunities pop up, and we just felt like it wasn't the right time, place, deal, etc. I'm someone who just kind of lives by my gut, and I think it just needs to feel right for us in our gut.
Yeah.
I also think like we live in a society where I think growth, you have to ask yourself like, who's growth serving? Right. And I think
that's the goal. Yeah.
Right. And I think like more often than not, people are telling you you should grow because they have maybe an interest in that growth, right? Whether they're their landlord or they're building out a new hotel, and they think there's value for you to be part of it. And I think we listen to everything that comes our way, but I think, you know, I always remind myself that it took Danny 10 years, Danny Meyer, one of the great restaurateurs of our time. It took him 10 years to go from Union Square Cafe to Gramercy Tavern. And I think it's a good reminder that like arguably the greatest restaurateur of our time took his sweet time early on. And I think, you know, we want to make sure, one, that we have a bench and that we can also scale our values. I don't think it makes sense for us to grow to a restaurant number 2 unless we have the right culture in place, the right people in place. And I think we have those things now, so we have more of an open conversation around it. But I don't think we feel the need or the impetus or the desire to do it tomorrow.
It's just been such a pleasure to hear, you know, your deep thoughts about this industry that all of us love and appreciate the spirit you bring to it. And thanks for sitting down with us today.
And thanks for having us, and like congrats on 50 years. I think it's like such an incredible thing for anything to survive that long, but to have a place that's like built on these principles of warmth and hospitality, to be like the, you know, the light on the mountaintop for all of us for as long as you guys have been. You guys are really important to our business and our industry, and it means so much to be a small part of it this weekend. So thank you for having us.
Thank you. Happy birthday.
Yeah. Thank you.